All right, thanks, guys. Thank you very much for being here. Today we're going to be talking about getting predictable paid marketing results. So in other words, every time you do paid advertising, I want to guarantee that you actually get a positive ROI on your marketing. So today's outcomes, understanding the key performance metrics, and I'm going to be focusing on SEM, display, and email, determining what each click is worth, and how to predict outcomes before you even start the campaign. So, have we moved to? Okay, so what this presentation is not about is the mechanisms of how SEM, email, and display works. It's not about how to write good copy, and it's not how to create effective ads or banners. Just what I'm going to talk about is the metrics. And if you know how to use the metrics correctly, you're going to become a very good marketer. So most marketers are like kids in a candy store when they have a budget. You know, they see the money in front of them, and they're all very eager to go out there and try and prove to their bosses that they're very good at marketing, and often just waste their money. Have you ever felt like your marketing campaigns spent more money than they generated revenue? Has anybody ever done that? Advertised? Yeah? Okay. Yep. All right. So we're going to stop that after today. So something to tweet about for you lot is if your marketing is cost effective, you never have to stop it. So I don't know how many of you guys have worked in marketing, but I've seen, marketing managers being asked by their CEO or their boss to stop marketing or cut back on marketing because it's actually costing too much, which is a ridiculous concept because the job of marketing is to drive traffic through the door and make them customers. So if you're not doing marketing right, well, you're going to have your boss asking you to stop. So first I want to lay out some principles about how to become a successful marketer. So the first one is knowing what your customer is worth. The second one is knowing what your average conversion rate is by different channels. So without these two little things, you cannot be an effective marketer. So just to repeat that, know what your customer is worth and know what your average conversion rate by channel is. The second rule is if a dollar spent doesn't give you two back, don't spend a dollar. So my philosophy of marketing, don't do marketing just for the sake of it. Make sure it always brings back a positive ROI. Otherwise, it's just literally a waste of money, because what's the point of spending $2 to get one back? You're just throwing money away. So let's start off with search engine marketing. So before we start, I have a couple of assumptions. So the first assumption is you're targeting the right keywords. You know the average value of your customer, and you know the average conversion rate for either organic or paid search. So these are the only things you need to know before you actually get into search engine marketing. So this is the most important metric in search engine marketing. Forget about quality scores, forget about everything else. This is the most important thing, cost per click. It's so important, I'm putting it on 2 slides. It's cost per click. That's how important it is. So to highlight why it is so, I've created what I call a simplified SEM possibilities chart. Which way is the camera pointing? Anyway, I'll just go here. So what I've done is I've put in a couple of assumptions. So firstly, our profit per customer is $150. We have assumed 5,000 search queries per month. And here is our only variable, and that is cost per click. This is the only dial that you can actually turn up and down, right? And when you turn that dial up and down, there is going to be a flow-on effect. For example, your position might change. So the lower you go in the position, what happens? Your click-through rate slowly dissipates. Now, what I want to point out here is at the different click rates, how much is it costing you at the end of the month or whatever the period is? Now, we know that our conversion rate is more or less static if we are targeting the audience correctly. And we've got something here, conversions. So if we spend a lot of money, sure, we get a lot of conversions, but this is a very important column right here, your net position. If you're spending $15 a click, you're losing $3,750 a month. And if you decrease that, all of a sudden you start getting into the black, and you're actually making money. So through this, just one simple thing, forget about your quality scores, forget about everything else, through just affecting your CPC, you can become more profitable. Now, there does come a point in search engine marketing where you can bid a little bit too low. And what happens is you're not driving enough traffic to your website. So here's a really interesting thing. In this hypothetical example, you're actually making more money over here in the middle of the range, say at $3 cost per click, as opposed to $2 a click, because you're actually not generating enough traffic to your website. So for any of you who have used search engine marketing before, you've probably seen that Google would like to suggest to you what you should bid per keyword. My advice to you is forget about what Google suggests to you, because Google is in the business of making money through ad clicks. And how do you make more money through ad clicks? You just tell people, bid more. And it's as simple as that. But if you go back and you use this little formula here, and you do your own maths, you're going to be actually profitable. If you do what Google suggests, chances are you're going to be unprofitable. So don't fall for that trap. So I'm just going to quickly go through a few pro tips. Split your ad creatives. Know if people come from mobile or desktop or both, and then apply this mathematics appropriately. So for example, you might notice 80% of your customers come from mobile, or vice versa. So segmenting your audience is very important. Use the following ad extensions. So within search engine marketing, it's all about real estate. The more real estate you have, the more likely it is that a user is going to click on your ad. So use things like callouts, site links, which is the links, the telephone, or the address, just to consume more territory and reduce the visibility of your competitors. Use the keyword insertion tool. It basically makes every ad relevant. I'm not going to describe what it does, but look into it. And add negative keywords. If you do not give away free stuff, don't bid for the keyword free, and so on and so forth. If you only sell in Sydney, negative the keyword Brisbane, and so on and so forth. All right, let's move on to display advertising. So assumptions. Irrespective of whether it's remarketing, placement, in-market segments, whatever, you know the value per customer, and you know your display marketing's average conversion rate. Now, if you've never done display marketing before, your average conversion rate is likely to be the crappiest performing channel you have. It's just one of those things. So look at whatever your crappiest channel is, and that's probably what your conversion rate is. So 60% of mobile banners are clicked on by accident. So that's pretty interesting. Righto. So again, the single most important thing in display is cost per click. And again, I'm going to demonstrate this by another table. And here we can see, again, your cost per click. If we start at $10, every month you're losing $3,500. But if you keep on reducing, you're starting to get into the black and actually making money. So again, before you start any marketing campaign, do the mathematics, look at your conversion rate, and bid for that. Forget what Google suggests. Forget the fact that you're not getting a lot of impressions. I'd rather have fewer impressions and positive outcomes than all the impressions in the world and losing money. So pro tips, again, split test your ads. Implement impression caps. So if you've been pestered in the past by ads that just keep on appearing everywhere, and you've been annoyed by that, so will your potential customers, so you can cap how many times these appear. Try different segmenting options. So Google, Facebook, LinkedIn offer many segmenting options. Like with Facebook, you can choose people's age and things like that. Upload your lead database into Facebook or Google. So I'm not sure if many of you know this, but if you have a big email list, you can actually target that email list through your AdWords. So if Google recognizes a particular email, it can actually dish out ads to your existing customer base, because existing customers are most likely to buy again. And I have a slide share on customer journey optimization. It goes into display marketing a little bit more. Have a look at it if you can. And lastly, I'm going to move on to email sponsorship. So again, assumptions. You're targeting the right audience. Targeting the right audience via email can convert as well as any of your best channels. Again, you know the value per customer, and you know what the average conversion rate is for a well-targeted audience or a not so well-targeted audience. Email lists can be quite funny, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So unlike SEM and display, there's a little bit more to it when it comes to your most valuable KPIs within email marketing. So the first one, of course, very important, the price of the sponsorship. But the critical information you need to know before you start is the number of subscribers they have, the average open rate, and the average click-through rate. If an advertiser refuses to give you that information, do not advertise with them. It's as simple as that, because they're probably going to rip you off. So that critical information, it's just a must. So a marketer just paid what's on the rate card to these publishers. So never pay what's on the rate card, and we're going to find out about that now. So this might be a little bit hard to see, but what I've done is I've created 3 different variables. And I want to just highlight how a small change can mean the difference between profitability and loss. So in this example, subscribers, profit per customer, and conversion rates are static. So we're going to assume no matter what, these are going to be the same. But we're going to play around with 3 other things, and that is those valuable KPIs, the cost, the open rate, and the click-through rate. So in the top scenario, I've got a very good email list, 40% open rate, and a 10% click-through rate. So these are the 2 key variables. Now, at a $6,000 sponsorship for 10,000 subscribers, all things being equal, we're losing $3,000. We have to cut that in half just to break even, and we have to get that sponsorship down from $6,000 to $2,000 just to make any money. So I'm not sure how many of you are full-time marketers, but if you're targeting a particular niche, it's very common to see channels charging some ridiculous amounts, like, say, $10,000 for a list of 20,000 emails. It's very common. And it might seem like a great idea because, sure, it's branding, it's targeted. You got to know the figures before you commit. Now let's do just a small change to scenario 1. We're going to reduce our open rate from 40% to 30%. And we're going to reduce our click-through rate just a little bit. We're going to go from 10% to 7.5. And look at what happens here. We don't need to go through the numbers. Just to be profitable in this scenario, and that's a very good scenario, if you get a 30% open rate, 7.5 CTR, that is fabulous. But you need to pay $1,000 for those 10,000 subscribers. Otherwise, you're losing money in all other scenarios. And lastly, let's go to what's actually a far more common scenario if you do sponsored emails. And that's an open rate of about 15%. And if you're lucky, a CTR of 5%, which would be really a fantastic CTR for a list that you don't own. Now, in this particular scenario, everything remains the same, but I've had to reduce the cost of the sponsorship to $250. So for those 10,000 emails, the sponsorship is not worthwhile unless you're only paying $250 to make any money whatsoever. Actually, it's about $500 to make $63. So there you go. You got to do your mathematics before you start. So get the data, get the subscribers, average open rate, and CTR. Feed the data into the spreadsheet. If the above preparation doesn't reap success, you either targeted the wrong audience or you were lied to. So this is always going to reap success. If you plug the numbers in and you don't make a profit, somebody along the way lied or you just targeted the wrong audience. So negotiate harder and be prepared to walk away if you're doing email sponsorships. Being armed with data makes negotiation very easy. If you can be transparent with the publisher, getting the cost down is much easier. All right, so pro tips for emails. Again, split test them. Don't offer options. Focus on getting the user to take one action. So that's basically if you've seen any spam emails where they have multiple options to click. The most successful emails usually reduce the number of options. Test your emails before sending them out. Just always get somebody else to proofread your emails. I've made too many mistakes, embarrassingly, because of not following that little step. Test your emails on different email clients, especially Outlook. Even though everybody's got Outlook if they work professionally, it's amazing how little that client supports. So that's the end of the presentations. Have we got any questions? I'm glad I was very clear with everything. Too much maths?
Any questions, guys? Yeah, we've got one at the back.
Yeah, try to avoid that.
Dennis, thanks. Have you got any case studies or any sort of customer stories that you can share with us, particularly on the email side? Because I think the email one is a bit of a difficult sell. It's very difficult to get good results from marketing through especially somebody else's email. Have you got any stories you can share with us about some email campaigns that have succeeded?
Yeah, I'll just talk about my own campaign. So the company I worked before this called Ninefold. We targeted a very narrow niche. Actually, did you have any specific questions about the email? Because all I'm going to do is say I targeted this site, it worked really well, and go Dennis, you know. But what is there anything more specific?
Yeah, sorry, I need to know the product and what the email was.
Yeah.
So if you can talk a little bit about that. I'm not familiar with Ninefold.
Do you want to talk about what we targeted, or?
Yeah, so you're targeting a particular audience.
Okay.
Somebody else's list.
Yep.
What's your offer in the email?
Yep.
Who's the demographic? Talk a bit about that, please.
Okay. Well, the thing is, it's about knowing your audience. So in the Ninefold scenario, they provided niche hosting for Ruby on Rails developers. So in other words, they made your code go to the cloud very quickly. Now, what list did we target? It was a list called Ruby Weekly. So it's pretty much about as targeted as you can get. And I milked this every month because it was just very good. You couldn't possibly be any more targeted. And the list, I can't remember off the top of my head, it might have been 50,000. I might have paid, I don't know, $1,000 for it. But, you know, it was very easy to pick my audience there, right? I did have another company I dealt with, which had a much bigger list. They had like 200,000 emails, and to me it sounded very exciting. You know, I had a chat to them about those valuable metrics, such as, you know, open rates and CTR, and basically these guys were full of shit. I didn't spend all that much money, and you would have thought with such a huge list, and they said they were all opt-in for also Ruby on Rails related content, and they weren't. The open rate was atrocious, the click-through rate was atrocious, and I had a lot more transparency with company number one than with this company, and basically I ditched them pretty quickly. Now I'm working for financial institutions. We do personal loans. It's basically FMCG, right? You can target everybody in this room with personal loans. It's really about volume and keeping the cost down. So we've done sponsorships with ClickFrenzy. So many of you might have heard of ClickFrenzy. They've got a database of like 1 million or more users, which is brilliant, and they're all in Australia. They've all maxed out their credit card buying stuff they don't need. So they're exactly our target audience, right? It didn't take much convincing for us to go in and sponsor that. Of course, we do these numbers, and we run it a few times, and it's always been pretty successful, but there have been things that we needed to tweak. So one good example is when you actually send. So our first email was a smashing success, and then our second and third email weren't quite as successful, and I wasn't too sure why. It was like considerable enough for me to be going, there's got to be more to this than maybe delivery rates or something like that. And when I looked into it a little closer, what I discovered is the time during which the email was sent. So I got into Google Analytics, ran the time of day report for when the email got sent out, and the first email went out about 8 a.m. And so basically what you saw is this initial spike of when people open their emails on their way to work or something like that. Then as they start working, it declines, and then around lunchtime it peaked. So we basically got 2 peaks during the day. And I don't know why, but when we had the company send the email at about 10 a.m., we sort of just had this like one peak, and then it just kind of mellowed out, and we probably got maybe 20 to 30% more clicks by sending it out a little bit earlier. So there are other nuances, and that's probably a great lesson for everybody there about the time during which you send the email. But again, even if that's not a factor, just knowing those other basic things will always ensure you are profitable. Any other questions? At the back?
You mentioned that.
We'll get the
sorry,
box
just
for
1
the
second.
camera.
Thanks, man. You mentioned that the cost per click was one of the pivotal points of SEM campaigns,
Yep.
although once you also covered the fact that we have to focus on what is a customer worth, the average value of a customer once they come to your website.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have that information, you know that your customer's worth X number of dollars, then clearly you can then say, well, really the most important factor is the cost per acquisition. Because if a customer is worth $100, for example, and you're able to get them to your site, regardless of the cost per click.
Yeah, you're right. Like cost per acquisition is basically what drives the cost per click, right? So
Yeah, and at the same time, the cost per click can obviously be manipulated by the quality score, which is pivotal to really having a successful SEM
Yeah,
campaign.
absolutely. For me, it's about narrowing down to the one core thing. So you could be the most awful marketer in the world, but if you knew your average customer is worth $100 and you want to make $20 per customer, if you knew your conversion rate, you can work your way back there, doing nothing else whatsoever. So I agree, you need to optimize your landing pages to ensure you have higher engagement. You need to optimize your SEM copy to ensure you have a higher click-through rate, because these things affect the quality score. And for those who aren't familiar with what's the importance of a quality score, it effectively can slash how much you pay per click, because your ad is deemed very relevant because people are clicking through and engaging with your website. The content seems relevant. So yes, you're right, cost per acquisition is the most important thing, but the thing, I guess, to me it's all about this, right? Cost per acquisition, it's the flip side of the same coin. I think that's really where we're getting at.
Thanks.
All good.
Do you run lots of testing experiments for your paid campaigns, and how do you your initial hypothesis with, I guess, the initial data that you've had in the past, and then how many sort of growth experiments do you do, and kind of then what's the sort of time length as well that you find what's working and what doesn't work?
Is that for search engine, for
so-
email or?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say email, just normal, say, paid search campaigns.
For paid search, I think it's about resourcing for me. So at RateSet, I'm basically the jack of all digital trades, and don't have a lot of time to focus on these things. So I might look into this thing once a month, say. I mean, ideally, I would like to do more, but I will look at it once a month. I'll have some basic hypothesis. There's a tool called AdWords Editor, and basically it allows you to mass edit a lot of ads. And that's been really helpful for me because, sort of touching base on what Rob was discussing earlier about the long tail, my SEM strategy, and part of why it's successful, is I target the long tail. So I'm in personal loans. My suggested cost per click could be $10, $15, etc. I'm getting leads at some of what these costs per clicks are, right? So I'm driving my cost way down, and the way I'm driving the cost way down is by proactively targeting keywords within SEM that the other people won't do. So I know if you work in agency side, you get your commission based on how much a company is spending, and it doesn't actually buy a lot of hours. And to set up this campaign, it probably took me about 3 weeks full-time work. So nothing but AdWords for 3 weeks. I've got literally tens of thousands of keywords, hundreds of ad groups, and dozens of campaigns. So it just gives you the scale of what I'm talking about. It still doesn't diminish from this point of, if you haven't got time to do all of that, if you can only set up a basic campaign, start a basic campaign where you're profitable straight from the word go. But if you have got the time, invest in the long tail, build out huge ad groups, huge campaigns, and really long keyword tail lists. Cool.
So how you can pay Google for getting AdWords on top, and you can also sort of do better landing pages to get sort of. Is there some? So is it some way to pay to the top, or do you always need to? Is there some sort of a?
Just to clarify, are you talking about paid search marketing, or are you talking about organic search?
I'm talking about paid, like
Paid?
AdWords. Is it somewhere way to cut line by paying, or is it always sort of?
What do you mean your position?
Yeah, exactly.
So your position is determined by a number of factors. The two most important things are going to be your cost per click and your quality score. Now, these two things are multiplied to give you a number. So let's say you have a quality score of 10 and you have a bid of $2. It'll give you a score of 20, right? So let's say to be at number 1, you need a score of 20, just hypothetically. If you have, this data is available to you, right, within Google. So if you see you have a quality score of 5, then you need $4 to be at number 1 to get to that score of 20. But there's many more factors to it than that, right? So I don't want to oversimplify it. And also note that it's not important if you're not always number 1. So for example, like I mentioned, I have tens of thousands of keywords that I bid for. And I have many that have a quality score of 1. So in other words, the keywords I'm bidding for, according to Google, are about as relevant as they possibly can get. For example, competitor keywords, because I'm not going to have the competitor name in my ad. It's not going to be in the URL. It's not going to be on the landing page. It's just irrelevant. But I know bidding on my competitors is worthwhile. And in my experience, I might be only losing out on about 40% impression share. So I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Google actually tells you how many impressions are you losing out on within search engine marketing. And I can see on these quality score of 1 keywords, I'm losing out 40%, but I don't care. And the reason why is because it's profitable. I'm still making money, I'm still getting my visibility. It might be not as much as the guy who's paying $20, but screw him because he's losing money, and that's my mentality about it.